Hey everybody, my name is Chris Milo. I'm an Earth and Space Science teacher, as well as an anatomy and physiology teacher and geology teacher at Carl Sandburg High School. I want to take you through a presentation on goal setting and alternative assessing. There's a lot that kind of goes on how my class runs. So I'm really going to focus on a couple things that deal with goal setting here. So I'm going to take you through a sample unit. I'll take you through our atmosphere unit in Earth and Space Science here. Okay. And so the units are broken into these smaller subunits or modules. And what the students will do as soon as they start the beginning of the unit, they'll do an intro pretest. And this pretest is basically trying to gauge at where they're at with some of the pre-knowledge. They really shouldn't have any background information on atmospheric science. So they'll take that pretest. It doesn't really count as a grade, but they're going to need that information for something called a SMART goal, which I'll talk about here in just a little bit. So they'll do the intro pretest. They'll work their way through the units. And as they work their way through the units, or each subunit, I should say, it's taught per mastery. And so, for example, you'll see this, once you get through like the atmospheric layers, there's going to be a quiz on the layers here. It's 5 questions. They got to score 4 or better to move on to the next subunit or the next module. So they won't be able to move into humidity until they at least score that. Now they can always go back and retake that quiz to score that 4 or 5. All they have to do is go back into the subunit and then do another assessment. But I'm not going to get way into that. But what I am letting you know is that there's learning for mastery going on here. And so once they score that particular amount, so if they get a 4 or a 5, the next module will then unlock. They'll not be able to get into it. It'll actually be grayed out until they actually meet that standard. And then they'll work to the next subunit, and then they'll quiz out of that. And eventually, what they'll do is they'll get into this, the assessment, okay, or the summative assessment. So at the end of the unit, there'll be a summative assessment. What there is there will be a atmospheric science summative pretest. So they'll take that, basically the test before the test. By this time, they should have a pretty good background knowledge on atmospheric science. They've been through all the subunits. They've taken all these mastery quizzes. So by the time they come to the pretest, this is kind of their gauge on how they're going to do on the test. So do the summative pretest, and they're going to go into something called a SMART goal. And SMART goals you probably have heard before. I keep it kind of rigid so they know what the SMART stand for. And once again, I do this how it really works for me. You can adapt it however you want it to work for you. I do it for retakes, but some people don't like to do retakes. That's okay. Right now I'm working in a PLC group, and in our PLC group, some don't do retakes. They can still adapt a goal to how it works for their particular students. And I think it's important that we set goals because, we do it in everyday life. Even our students do it, but it's not formalized. So what this form does, it formalizes setting their goals. So for atmospheric science, they'll put their first and last name in there, their class period. And if you remember that intro pretest, the one they take before the actual unit, they'll put their percent right here. Okay. And generally speaking, we expect it to be pretty low, and that's okay. And we tell them, hey, you're taking this intro pretest. We don't expect it to be very high, and that's okay. So they'll fill that out, and then what they'll do is they'll go to their summative pretest. This one we would expect to be a little bit higher, and this gauges how well they actually know the information. And so they're just going to hit the radio button on what score they got, and they're going to base their goal off of this score for their actual test. Remember, they haven't taken the test yet. This is still a summative pretest. And this part here says, well, what specifically do you need to study more of? So I'm going to go back to the pretest here. So just give me a moment while I go back into my modules. Sorry, it skipped on me here. Atmospheric science pretest. And it is a question breakdown. It pulls from a bank. So this is what my questions do. Each bank, like for example, like the seasons bank probably has 30 questions on seasons. Every time they take a pretest or they retake a quiz or whatever, it pulls different questions out of that bank. So they never get the same test anytime they retake it, or it won't be the same test as somebody else in the class. Nonetheless, the question breakdown is as follows. So what they'll do is they'll take this pre-test, then they'll go back and look at it, and they'll see which topics they're not quite getting. Those are the ones they need to go back and study. This is where they'll click in here, like, hey, what areas they need to study more of? And they'll click whatever box they feel they need more help in an area that might necessarily not be their strength at this particular time. And so they should go back in. And sometimes I'll link Quizlets to these particular topics, or I'll link certain parts of the modules, and they know where to go back in and study that material. Then the bread and butter of the presentation here is their SMART goal. Okay, what do they want to score on their test? Now, we will not let them set that anywhere below a 70, because I don't feel a D and an F is a very good goal. But anything that's 70% and higher is a goal that they can put on here. Now, once this goes in here, it's written in stone. We hold them accountable for that goal. Any percent they set over 70 counts as 0.1% extra credit towards their test. So, for example, if they set their goal at a 71, don't mean to do that. Try that again. The short answer. Well, it's not going to let me answer. It's going to let me edit. Nonetheless, okay. If they set it at 71, they would get 0.1 added onto their test if they reach that goal. If they set it at an 80, well, that's 10% over 70. That'd be 1 added on to their overall test score. Okay. Now, if they don't reach their goal, that's going to account for something later on. So whatever goal they set goes into here. And then, how will they achieve this goal? They'll write down what they need to study. Okay. Like, hey, I'm really kind of hung up on seasons, but I'm going to go into the seasons Quizlet and study that more, because they should know by now what categories they're deficient in. And then why is it relevant? So why is this important to you? And then the T for SMART, how much time do you need? Now, once again, I do retakes. Some people don't. You do what works for you and take out of this what you want to take out of it. But they are allowed to do retakes on the test as long as they go back and do test corrections. Okay, once they're good, then it opens up the test for them to come in and take. And they have up until the unit is over, or the next unit is over, to retake the previous unit. So, for example, when meteorology is done, atmospheric science, this test would have expired. So they generally get about 2 weeks. It's about how long a unit typically takes. So they would put in their calendar. We don't necessarily hold them accountable for the actual date, but at least put something in their head and go, okay, yeah, this is what data you need. Well, I want to get this done by. So once again, putting things on a timeline and accountability. And so then they'll submit this SMART goal. I'll lock it so they can't go back in and change it. And then what I'll do is I will then go into my grade book, and I'll enter it into this category right here, where it says atmospheric science SMART goal. You notice it is bold. It means it's a no count. Okay, so it doesn't count towards their grade. But this is the goal that these students set for themselves. You can see this person set it, 10% over 70. This one stayed at 70, 20% over 70. This person, very ambitious, set it at 100. This one set it at 70. So 70 is kind of the safe zone there, because you can't go any lower than that. Once again, if you set it at 70, there is no extra credit either. So that's where you kind of go into that. Okay, so this is where the SMART goals goes in. And then I'll put the test in, and then every time, like, I have a batch of retakes, I update those scores and they go back in here. So here's pretty much the final scores. Now, let me just break this down here. The extra credit's already in here. So what I'll do is I'll make a comment. Okay, so like this person, the original score was an 18, but SMART goal was met, and they set their, if you remember, they set their goal at an 80. Okay, and they reached it. Okay, they got an 18 out of 20. They got a 90%. So they actually exceeded their goal. So I'll add that 1%. Sorry, not 1%. I'll add that 1 point to their score. Now, as you can see here, tests have a weight of 45%. So 1 point might not seem like a lot, but it actually is a lot when these tests are weighted so much. This person did not reach their goal. Okay, so if you look here, that person set it at a 70. They got a 65%. So I just make a comment, SMART goal not met. Okay, this person did pretty well. They set their goal at a 90. They got 100% on the test. So they get 2 points added on. Remember, 0.1% extra credit, anything over 70. So that's 20% over 70. So they get 2 points added on. This person here, Set it at 100, very lofty goal. They scored a 65%, did not meet. The last person here set it at the minimum, the 70, and they got an 80% on the test. So they don't get any extra credit, but their goal is met. Okay, so the bonus is they get extra credit, but how do I hold them accountable if they don't reach their goal? This is where this category comes in. It's the assessment categories. It's called the atmospheric science SMART goal assessment. So if they reach or exceed their goal, whether it's a 70 or whether it's 100, they get 10 out of 10. The assessment category is not weighted very heavily. It's like 5%, but at least it shows like, hey, by the way, we're actually monitoring this. This person set their goal of an 80. Originally they got a 90%, the extra credit showing in here. So they met their goal. They got 10 out of 10. This person set their goal at a 70%. Okay, they got a 65%. So where does this number come from? I take that 65% they earned, take it over 70, and it becomes 93%. So what they did is they met 93% of their goal. So I reward them for almost getting there. So that's where the 9.3 is. It's from the 93%. So it's not like a hit or miss, like you get 10 or you get 0. It really is saying, like, hey, you tried, you may have taken the test a couple times, didn't quite meet it, but this is what you're going to get. Okay, this person, if you remember, they set their goal at 90%. They got 100 on the test. They've met it, so they get the 10 out of 10. This person set their goal at 100, quite a ways off. They got a 13 out of 20, so it's 65%. So that comes in at 6.5. And this person reached their goal here. They set it at 70. They got an 80 on the test, and then they got a 10 out of 10. And so I do this for every unit. And so you can see how the SMART goals really work. Now, like I said, the way I do it is not necessarily a primer of how it has to be done. Okay. This just works for me. It's very regimented, for my students. I think this helps that it's actually really kind of spelled out. I don't leave a lot of things open-ended because I kind of feel they try to put some very short, vague answers in there. So instead, I kind of meet the students where they are at. It's like, you know what? Hey, here's some radio buttons, or hey, like instead of them like just putting down like what's a specific goal, I got to study more. No, I want to know specifically what you need to study. And so for them, they could just kind of click some buttons and go, okay, yeah, I want to study the following. And the way I tell my students to study is like, if you know the material, don't study it. Okay, you already know it. That's what the pretest is for. So why waste time restudying material that you already know? Go back in and look things over that you're struggling with. And so like if you're struggling in these topics, go back into that module, go back into that subunit and rewatch a video lesson or do a Quizlet, study with that. So this kind of helps focus them on what they should be looking at. And then once again, the measurable thing is what I really hold them accountable to, so I really say, hey, here's your number. You cannot change it. If they don't submit a SMART goal, that SMART goal assessment category, as you've seen over here, if they don't submit it, it shows a 0 and not handed in because they never did it. And if they don't do it, there's no chance for extra credit. Okay, so it's a kind of a crash course on what I do. Of course, make it work for you. Mine's not the be all end all. I just found that this works for me, but my guys also have retakes and they're allowed to do that. And if you don't want to do retakes, and modify it for how you want to make it work. Like, hey, you get one chance to hit your goal. If you get it, there's just credit. If you don't, well, then it's going to go in this category and we're going to basically prorate that percentage. I know there's a lot of moving parts to it, and I run my class very differently. So if you ever have any questions about how I run my class, or if you have any questions about how these SMART goals work, or something seems kind of confusing, reach out anytime. You can get a hold of me at C as in cat, M as in Mary, ILO, C Milo at d230.org. Once again, I appreciate your time. And if you ever have any questions on anything, by all means, feel free to reach out.